Tonight, a Larry Barker investigation. It's a $1 million gadget that was bought with your money. But in the end, it sat in storage unused for nearly a decade. Here's Larry's report. Up, up, and away, a museum's $1 million balloon blunder.
We've seen planes and trains and automobiles related to government waste. But now, an amusement ride, that's a whole new low.
Our idea was to make it a little bit of Disneyland.
Even if this had been a good idea, it's the wrong thing to be spending taxpayer dollars on.
Think of it as a bit of Disneyland on the Rio Grande, an adventure attraction at Albuquerque's International Balloon Museum. Visitors from all over the world would flock here to see it.
It's called a 4D experience, where a fast-paced movie is projected on a special screen in a custom-built theater. Visitors feel the action through special effects like rain, strobe lights, wind, and vibrating chairs. Michael Anderson is a founding member of the Balloon Museum's board.
The hope was that it would add another exciting attraction or element to the museum. We wanted it to be an overall educational experience that people would really enjoy.
So the Balloon Museum plopped down $1 million to purchase New Mexico's first 4D theater experience. Truckloads of sophisticated equipment was shipped, and museum officials hoped to have the theater installed in time for the 2006 Balloon Fiesta. But 10 fiestas later, the expensive apparatus still sits in a warehouse. Albuquerque's $1 million investment in a Disneyland-like attraction was a bust. As blunders go, this one was a whopper. Rob Perry is Albuquerque's chief administrative officer.
I was so disappointed and really flabbergasted that this significant expenditure was so ill-conceived and thoughtlessly analyzed that we ended up basically buying a white elephant 10 years ago.
The project goes all the way back to 2006, when the Balloon Museum Board lobbied then-Governor Bill Richardson for funding.
He was very willing to allocate a significant amount of money for the museum, for the theater.
Without any hearings, debate, or public notice, Governor Richardson reached into a pot of public money and single-handedly doled out $1 million for the theater. Months later, a purchase agreement was signed with a Canadian firm. In 2008, equipment to fill a 40-seat 4D theater was delivered. It included vibrating seats with seatbelts, a computer-controlled surround sound audio system, projectors, electrical platform, power control cabinets, large format 3D projection screen, snow machines, wind machines, and leg ticklers.
The museum had everything it needed to install the attraction, everything except a feasibility study. You see, it was only after the equipment was delivered that museum officials learned the massive apparatus would not fit in the building. The concrete floor would have to be ripped out, underground utilities would have to be relocated, and that huge projection screen, well, it was just too big for the building.
So truckloads of expensive gear was relegated to storage, where it's been sitting for 8 years.
Who accepts the blame for what's happened with that?
I don't like to point fingers, really, but I think it was one of those unfortunate comedy of errors.
One of the key players was architect Mark Schiff. Schiff's architectural firm was paid $65,000 to design the installation of the theater.
The architect was the one that was supposed to make it work. I would say the architect was the one that really possibly dropped the ball.
At the same time as Schiff was designing the museum theater installation, he was paying bribes to public officials in the Metro courthouse scandal. Schiff later pleaded guilty and served time. Instead of studying the feasibility of a 4D theater before plunking down $1 million, museum officials commissioned a study 3 years after buying the equipment.
According to the consultant, The museum's purchase was ill-conceived. Experts said instead of being a draw for the museum, the 4D theater would likely be a significant drain on resources. In fact, the consultant said a specialized theater in Albuquerque would probably be a losing proposition. The conclusion? A 4D theater is not a viable attraction for the Balloon Museum. Oops.
I don't think there's a good way to explain this to taxpayers. I think they would expect that there would have been a minimum of planning on the front end, and so it's really indefensible.
Fred Nathan heads up the nonpartisan think tank Think New Mexico. Nathan says the legislature needs to change the way it funds public projects.
Well, you have to keep in mind that this is money that's supposed to be used for public infrastructure, things like roads and water systems. Our elected leaders in Santa Fe need to pass a law so that we're funding worthy projects and not projects like this that should never have been funded in the first place.
In my district, $1 million is a lot of money. I'd dearly love to have it for my streets and my local government, whether it's Lordsburg, Deming, or TRC, or Las Cruces.
Senator John Arthur Smith chairs the Legislative Finance Committee.
Sort of a sad day in government when you hear incidents like this. And it's not just a reflection on the legislature, it's a reflection on all elected officials.
In an effort to salvage its $1 million investment, museum officials have now decided to retrofit exhibit space and install portions of the equipment to create a 3D theater. However, the decade-old equipment is no longer under warranty, and the museum has yet to figure out how it will pay for movies to be shown on the big screen. Among the items that cannot be reused is this brand new, massive electrical lift platform. If the museum can't find a buyer, it may be sold for scrap.
I think if you look back in the crystal ball and the game film on this about what happened, you'd probably find a lot of different people that bear responsibility for fairly thoughtless, poorly analyzed, and publicly funded waste.
Larry Barker, KRQE, News 13.
To read the full feasibility report from the $1 million blunder, go to the KRQE News app.